Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Now, in September 2022, I was lucky enough to board a flight to Vietnam, where I'd be jumping in swamps, climbing up hills, and taking on one of the toughest challenges with an entire group of incredible, crazy, quirky, amazing, and inspiring individuals who I'm lucky enough to call my friends, as we all went over and took part in SAS Who Dares Wins. Now, with any kind of TV production, they are always constrained to fit the absolute best bits into a short window of time. So as you won't be surprised to hear, there is so much more to these individuals than meets the eye. So on this mini series of podcasts, you get to listen in as I catch up with this incredible group of people. We discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly as it comes to SAS Who Dares Wins, our favorite instructors, our biggest challenges, and also learn a little bit more about what drives them, what inspires them, and how this journey was for them. It's been so much fun reminiscing and catching up. So if you are sitting comfortably, let's buckle up for safety and get in there with today's episode. I'll see you on the other side.
Hello! Can you hear me? There we go. Hi.
I can hear you perfectly. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm really good. You look really good. You look happy. You look good. I mean, not that you don't normally, but
I was miserable for quite a lot of those few days.
No,
so.
I don't think you were. I think you were in heavy contemplation.
That's one way of
I feel like you
it.
were it's a bit like getting caught in a bunch of waves, and you were looking for like a fixed point. You were looking for an anchor. Do you know what I'm saying? You were looking for something to grab hold of that gave you some kind of certainty. Does that make sense?
That is a very, very good way of putting it, actually. But I think that's the point, isn't it? There wasn't any certainty. There was no way of like knowing what we were doing or when we were doing it, and that's probably what was like just so far out of my comfort zone. But
this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. How are you finding being back home?
I'm doing better now. I have cried so much. Literally when we initially got out, I just couldn't stop crying, and then I ended up in tears on the plane home.
What was triggering you? You know when somebody dies, and I always say to people, like, you go through those phases where you have like misery, then you have anger, then you have frustration, then you have remorse, but then you're going back into anger again. Like you trigger it, and different things will set you off. What was it that was like setting you off? Because would it be spontaneous, or?
I think it was just like, I mean, going back to the waves, it was kind of like that. It was like every now and then I kept on getting waves of disappointment, which I hadn't expected, because when I handed my armband in, I decided hours before that I was handing my armband in, was feeling quite strongly that I was going to, because I just got to the point when I was just believing that it was physically too much for me. The thing that was killing me was the Bergen. It was literally just like, as soon as I put that on, you know, like, I mean, I think a few people weighed them when we had everything in them. They're like 28 kilograms.
Oh yeah, they were heavy.
That's like that's half my body weight.
Well, it's 4 stone. Yeah, it's heavier than most people's dogs. To be fair with you.
Yeah. And I like when I came back as well, my suitcase, I was picking that up. My suitcase weighed 23 kilograms on the way back, and I was picking that up like, Jesus Christ, this is heavy. And I was thinking I had that plus like maybe another 5 kilograms on my back, and like doing that in the heat and the humidity, running with it on, like literally that bag was so heavy on my back, it was bouncing my whole body, and my vision's just going all over the place because I'm just being whacked by this weight in my back. And it was like, so when we ran to the base of the waterfall, I was already like, shit, like I'm in trouble here, because that was so heavy. It was so hot, and I was just like stressing out. And then as soon as we did that run up the hill, like the heat just got to me, and I was in such a bad way. I'll be honest, I do not know how I pulled myself back physically to be able to actually go and do that abseil. Like that was sheer and utter determination.
You were again. You were like, I don't know. That sounds so hard. I was going to say like a flailing fish. You weren't flailing, but you were like, it was like trying to. I can't think of anything because it wasn't. You know, everyone was struggling so much in so many different ways. So none of this, none of this is remotely condescending. But it's like when you were trying to pack something into a box that wouldn't fit, or get a kid in a child seat. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, you're okay, and then they just fucking an arm would come out or a leg would come out. But some of it, to be fair, like some of it was genuinely physiological. I mean, that heat.
It was 100%
crazy. 100%. So people won't know that. Like we go there a few days before, and we have. Because of all the COVID and all that craziness, we have to stay in our rooms and we get tested every day. But what it does theoretically do is give you a little bit of a chance for acclimatization. So obviously we had no idea where we were going. And even when people said Vietnam, to me that had flashbacks of like, there's the war films. That's all I really thought. And I thought, lots of humidity, but it's a bit like when you try and describe a sauna to someone that's never been in it. How did you feel when you first stepped into the heat and the moisture? And it was a lot to take on.
I don't think I'd really got any idea of what it was going to be like, to be perfectly honest. I think I was quite surprised because obviously when we were allowed to go out for our walks, I was a bit shocked that like I'd start walking or running on whatever, and it was quite warm. But also some of those first few days we were there, we had rain. Like when we were training on the tennis court, it was like, it was
absolutely trashing it down. Literally,
it was like trying to train in a bath. It was just it sounds so stupid, but it was the wettest rain I've ever experienced.
Yeah, you know, like when you get out the bath and the room's all closed, and you're like, oh, it's a bit moist in here. I better be careful so I don't slip on my ass. Like that, but fucking everywhere.
Like I've never experienced anything like it. But the beauty of that was that it didn't feel too hot. It was okay. Like that was a lot more breathable. And like, I don't know if this is just me imagining things, but I feel like when we went from where we were staying to then actually being in the jungle, I feel like it was way closer in the jungle and I know it was because obviously the first day I had that splitting headache and I always get splitting headaches when the air is really, really close. And then after that storm, which, was the craziest storm I've ever experienced.
That thunder was unreal. It was like it was in the middle of the room. I mean, it was like
rolling around the hills.
It was so loud you couldn't even say to the next person next to you, like, "Oh God, can you hear that?" Because it was just almighty. It was something like you'd have out of a film, as though Thor or somebody was striking the ground next to you. It was freaking unreal. And I won't pretend I'm not a bloody meteorologist or anything like that, but I'll bet you're right, because we were in a built-up area where we were staying to start with, and then we drove into the really heavy, dense jungle effectively. And I'll bet there's something in, obviously the climate is different, but I'm sure there's something somebody far more intelligent than me would tell us about the fact of how much closer it was.
Yeah, because when we got there, they said it was 100% humidity, and I'd been looking at the humidity when we were like in quarantine before, and it was sitting around 70-75% humidity. So we then upped it. So I think there was that, but then also as the days went on, it also got a lot sunnier. And obviously one recruit hadn't got their hat, so we weren't allowed to wear our hats in the sun. But also thinking about that run up the hill, we were in full kit, like the only area of your body that had any exposure was your face, because we were in those leather gloves. We had a black helmet on, black attracts the sun. There were so many things that made it so hot. And I know without a doubt that my reaction to that, I mean, initially it was fatigue when they were making us do those hill sprints being, questionable in my case.
No, for me, as when somebody says sprint to me, I'm like, What, for like 5 meters, or like I've just been startled by
I'm
a
like,
dog? Yeah, I'll give you that for like a few meters, and then I'm into an encouraging motivational jog. Let's call it that. But
do you know
yeah,
what? In those situations, all those things that you've thought to yourself before about how you're going to deal with stuff when it gets tough goes out the window. Like I was running up that hill at one point, and I'm like, right, remember to pump your arms, Amelia. And then I'm thinking, like, right, your mum said just keep putting one foot in front of the other. When you're in that situation, going up a really steep hill, trying to run when you can't breathe because you're running up this steep hill and it's so hot, like putting one foot in front of the other is the hardest thing ever. And then I just couldn't catch my breath. And then it was like, obviously, I mean, I went down, didn't I? Like,
yeah.
I've never
That's
had
what
that
worried me.
before.
So you were. I mean, everybody was struggling, but we'd gotten to the top of one bit, and then we were asked to go back down again, weren't we? And I think I dropped back to see you, and then you literally just fell towards me. I don't think you said you thought you were going to faint. I know your eyes
No, I
just rolled
did.
back in your head, and then you just went down really hard.
I had no idea I was
Completely
going.
lost you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I kind of rolled you over and tried to sit you up, and then the DS came down
Do
and
you know
told us.
what? Literally, when the DS came down, because yeah, I had no idea it was going to happen. I just like 1 minute I'm standing up, the next minute I was like, oh, I appear to be on the floor. Okay, we're down here now. And then like you were there, and then like the next thing I know, there's the DS is there, and he's just shouting at you, going, get her
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
And
I know.
I'm laying on the floor, like
Yeah,
I don't know if I fainted or what that was. I don't really understand what happened to me,
yeah.
but
I think
so
some of
he's
that's
just
for the
shouting you
cameras
to
as
get
well,
me
though,
up.
because they're like, "Oh yeah, you need to get up, you need to keep going." But you don't try and get too technical. But I'm like, if somebody's just fainted. You don't want to encourage that. Oh, what's it called? Postural. Basically, you stand them up again, the blood pressure is just going to drop again, and they'll just get knocked
Yeah,
out again.
yeah,
So you want to try and ideally get their legs up, get their blood back to their head because they're clearly struggling to just remain
yeah,
conscious or anything like that. But I knew
yeah.
for you, it wasn't as such. I mean, you're obviously exhausted, but you weren't really exhausted. You were just overheating.
No, I was overheated. That's
You
the
were
exact problem.
massively
That's the
overheating because as
thing.
soon as we
Like,
got you into the shade, if we hadn't got you into the shade,
yeah,
you weren't going to recover.
no. But this is
Um,
the thing. It was like, it was really interesting because obviously they told us about heat exhaustion before.
yeah,
And if you go through the list of the symptoms, I was ticking every single one.
yeah,
And like, as soon as we got to the top, to be perfectly honest, I don't really remember much between you picking me off the floor and then us getting to the waterfall. I can't even remember that bit. But they, like, obviously the DS got me at the front of the line because I think he was wanting to keep an eye on me then. And then he got there and he said, how are you doing? And I said, can I just put my hands on my knees? And I put my hands on my knees because I was trying to like catch my breath and I was just so dizzy. And then I just went down again.
yeah.
And once I was down, there was no way then I was getting up again. I couldn't. I absolutely couldn't. And that was when I realized, like, I didn't, when you do a really hard workout, you know what your body feels like when your body's exhausted. It
Yeah.
didn't feel like that. I felt so ill, and I've never felt dizzy like that before, never experienced anything like that before. And I was just like, I'm overheated. That's what it was, because it felt like my body was on fire. It
Yeah.
was just, exactly what they'd said to us, that when the humidity's that high, you can't sweat.
No.
I just felt like my body was burning. So I just called the DS over and I was like, staff, I think this is the heat. Can I take my top off? He
Hmm.
said I was allowed to. The second I got those gloves off, to be honest,
Yeah, oh
it
God,
felt
yeah.
like a relief.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like I got those off, I got my top off, and I was like, okay, what are the things that they said to do? And I also remember the things that my boyfriend said to me before, because he's ex-army, and he said neck, armpits, head, places to try and cool your body
Yeah,
temperature down.
yeah,
So I just said, staff, like, can I pour some water over my neck? And he looked at me, and I think that was when he realized, like, this was heat, this wasn't
mm,
just
yeah,
fatigue, and he let me. And like from that point, I did start to cool down, but it did take time.
mm,
And I feel very grateful that they did recognize that it was clearly the heat
yeah,
and
oh,
gave
yeah.
me that time to recover, because initially what was going through my head was, I am not safe to abseil down a waterfall right
Oh,
now.
fuck no.
Like, I
Yeah,
couldn't stand up. I was
yeah,
trying to get on my knees to try and pull myself up a tree to just even sit on my knees. I couldn't do it. Like every time I moved, my head just felt like I was just going to pass out. So, I'm pleased that I had that time, that once my body temperature started coming down. Oh, and you gave me electrolytes. You
Yeah.
gave me a bottle with
Yeah,
electrolytes in as
yeah.
well. Once I had those, made me start to feel a
I
lot
didn't
better
think
as
it was a
well.
primary concern, but I knew that anybody could have benefited from it at that point in time, and I was like, let's just give this to her anyway. So I went and asked for some because we obviously had left our packs at the bottom by then. I thought this will at least give her that little bit of a
Yeah,
pick me up because everybody would have benefited
yeah,
from the. But to be fair to you, you'd held on to, and you're talking about it there when you're talking about that logical mindset about the systematic way to try and at least cool yourself down. Because I've had it with firefighters many times. We do a lot of heat stress and heat exhaustion training where rationale just goes out the window and you start to do things that you would never normally do. Like people
yeah,
will try and exit buildings where there's no doors, or they'll just completely lose consciousness of where they
yeah,
are, and all that sort of stuff. But your logic came back quite quickly. Hence, like you're trying
yeah,
to say, look,
yeah,
I need to take this off. I need to get.
yeah,
You were still holding on to that. It was only when you started
yeah.
to get, ironically, when you started to get a little bit better, was when Scott rolled over and damn near threw up all over your feet. You like
Do you know?
you just
Do you know
went
what
down,
he
Anna.
told
That
me?
was random. That was.
So he told me afterwards. He told me it was on the flight back yesterday. He threw up on my helmet.
Oh,
I didn't. I didn't know that that had happened. All I was
oh
thinking was
yeah. I
I
was
was
kneeling down
starting to
with you, and
come.
all of a sudden and we'd been up there for a few minutes by then, and he just came over and
Yeah,
started throwing up.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, "The
Because
fuck is
obviously
this?"
when we were doing the hill sprints, because obviously it was like the loser goes against the other
Yeah,
losers.
yeah, yeah.
Scott and I ended up being last. Him very, bloody like was it jungle foot he's got
Yeah,
or
jungle
whatever?
rot on his feet. Yeah,
Jungle
yeah.
rot, that's it.
Yeah.
Very justifiable that he was at the back. But he helped me through a lot of that as well. There's this one point that we were literally holding hands, dragging each other up that bloody hill. And so he was in a bad way as well. And then he came over. But I'd seen a few other people in the trees as well in a bad way. Like I
Mm.
think the staff were potentially surprised by how long it took us all to kind of get ourselves back together
Yeah,
after that one. But that was the point at which my mind started going, "Now you're done," because it
really.
was just it was at that point. It was because I saw everyone else just going ahead, and I was like, I am struggling so much, and it's frustrating in a way because like I know you say like in my response to that at the time, I was being quite rational in the sense of I knew that it was heat exhaustion. I knew it was that, and I knew it wasn't just fitness because
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
done a
yeah.
lot of that. I'd done a lot of that training building
I was
up
going
to
to say
it, but
you and your partner are both big into your training. What sort of
yeah,
training? Because I think everyone's had a slightly different approach. There's been some bulk like standards, which like they sent us a bunch of stuff that we needed to try and
yeah,
do. But I know you're big into your CrossFit as well, aren't you? So what sort of
yeah,
stuff had you done
yeah.
preparing for it?
So I'd kind of done a lot of CrossFit, but I kind of scaled some of that back to allow for slightly more targeted training. So I'd done a lot of training with weighted bags on my back,
Okay.
nowhere near the weight we were actually carrying. Like that's one of the things, I think when I started a few months before, I started with about 9 on my back, went up to like all of my regular runs being 15 on my back, and then I
Yeah.
did a few with 20 and 21, but nothing like 28, 30. I hadn't anticipated that it was going to be that much.
Yeah.
And I mean, as well, I think I'd anticipated that it was actually going to be like longer runs with lower
Yeah.
weight
I
on your
thought we were
back.
going to do some longer hacks. Yeah.
Yeah, but then
Longer
again, I
pull-ups,
don't
sorry.
think we could have with that heat.
Mm.
I really, like, I mean, with that heat and with that weight that we had on our backs, I
Yeah.
don't think you could do long runs. Like,
No.
I mean, it was insane. And one of the other things as well that I think was really difficult for me was that I was the second shortest of the group, like by far. So
Yeah. I mean, you were definitely one of the shortest. I don't know if you were the short. Who do you think was the shortest then?
I was the
Oh,
second shortest
yeah.
because we lined up, didn't we? Like in height
Rosie.
order.
Rosie's shorter than you, isn't she?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we lined up in height order before we went up the waterfall,
Yeah.
right? So, but that meant that like when we were doing some of these jogs with the bags on our backs, Bergens. Sorry, I don't want to get in trouble. God, it's still drilled into you, isn't it? When you were doing the marches, like most of you are marching. I'm having to do like march, march, trot, trot, march, march,
Yeah,
trot, trot,
you're skipping every
because
third step, aren't you?
yeah, because my legs were not long enough to everyone else's stride. So that was making it so much harder for me as well. So I think, in the sense of the training that I did preparing me for it, yeah, I think my fitness levels were at a decent place. And I think, I did all the right training. Like my boyfriend kind of managed a lot of that training for me. He had me doing runs, weighted runs. I was doing a lot of swimming as well. A lot of like strength programming for my legs, getting my legs as strong as possible. So, a lot of the beastings and stuff that we were doing when they were getting us through the motions of doing like a lot of those press ups, a lot of burpees, a lot of squats, lunges, all of that sort of stuff, I felt pretty solid. Like,
Yeah.
like they weren't, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to diminish how hard it was. Like it was really hard, but mentally it was a lot easier to go, okay, he's just asked me to do 20 burpees, I'll do those 20 burpees. Okay, now you want me to do 20 squats, I'll do those 20 squats. You break it down and just do what they're asking of you, and my legs felt quite strong. It honestly was just the running in that heat. You can't, I mean, unless you've experienced it, I don't think you can possibly understand how mental it is. It's just like before you even get started, you've done a few paces and you're absolutely drenched through. I mean, when we're like
even when we were just sat in the dorms,
yeah,
I was literally sweating
yeah,
non-stop, and I was like,
yeah,
I just felt a big slosh in my tummy because constantly trying to drink water, and I'm like, I know I'm not drinking electrolytes, and I'm
yeah,
just drinking
yeah,
water, but I'm literally
yeah,
sat here doing nothing,
yeah.
sweating, and you just you don't want to lie on your bed because you don't want to get your bed soaking wet, and you
No,
can't really go anywhere. You don't want to just sit on one of the hard wooden chairs,
no,
and it's like
no.
I can't fucking you just can't get away from it.
Yeah. And I was constantly deciding whether to take my top off or not. Like when we were in the dorms, obviously we weren't
Yeah,
allowed when we were out, but
yeah,
it was like I constantly needed to take my top off because I was so hot. And I mean, even those trousers, they keep the heat in, right?
oh
Like
yeah,
everything is so warm. But it was like most of the times we were asked to get outside, we were given a minute. A
yeah.
minute is not enough time to even put those boots on,
I
let
know
alone
that was the
put a
thing.
top back on and tuck it in neatly and all of that sort of thing. So I kept on like leaving my top on because I was like, sometimes we were taking our boots off to make sure we were airing our feet, but I was like, I am not risking more of a beating because I'm later because I've taken my boots and my top off. Like it was just, I think, in the beginning they gave us a minute because they were beasting us whatever. Like there was no
Yeah.
way
Oh
we could
yeah.
win. We were
Yeah.
we were gonna have a beasting, but it was like I didn't want to risk too much, like taking off too much to then have even more to have to do because every movement you did just sapped your energy
Mm.
so much.
Yeah.
It was just, and that was the thing for me. I think, it made it so difficult. And then in my head, I'm like, you're not fit enough. And you start kind of spiraling and thinking all of these thoughts. And I think, yeah, that's where mentally it was really, really tough.
I wanted to ask you about the dorms aspect of it because I know people won't know a lot about you, but like you're super independent. You're super professional at work, and you lived by yourself independently for a long time. Really,
Yeah,
how did you
yeah,
find living with 20 strangers and that the kind of group dynamics that came with that?
yeah. I mean, it was weird because I hadn't anticipated it, but it was actually when we were in the dorms that I struggled the most. I think, I'd thought that the hardest things would be like in the moment when you're doing the beastings and you're questioning whether you can carry on. Most of those times, I was just cracking on with it.
Yeah,
Like yeah, if it got hard, you'd slow down, but I just was going through the motions. When we were in the dorm was actually probably when I struggled mentally the most. I think that was partly because fear was a massive factor for me in there, right? You saw me, I was constantly worrying about whether I could do it, what was going to come next, that lack of control, not knowing what was going to happen, whether I'd be scared. And I was kind of scared a lot of the time. And, as I said, like I'm very independent. And so my way of dealing things normally would be to just kind of go into myself and just deal with it by myself.
yeah,
So, there was a lot of times where I was just going over to my bed and just like putting my cap on my head and trying to get some sleep. That was one, partly because, they'd said get sleep when you can, because we just never knew if we were going to be allowed to sleep at night or not. But that was also partly me just processing my thoughts. And one of the things that I found really hard was like, there were so many bold characters in that room and they were so positive, which was incredible. But that made me doubt myself a lot
Mm.
because like I see myself as a very positive, bubbly, happy person. And I see myself as very extroverted, but actually I'm an extroverted introvert in a way. Like, I think the way that I am so extroverted and outgoing with people is probably because I need that space and time by myself to be able to sustain that. So
Yeah.
I was quite surprised that there was times when in the group I was actually quite quiet, which is really not something that I'd usually associate with myself. And then I'm laying there like trying to sleep and everyone's involved and everyone's talking and I'm like, am I not making the most of this? Am I not engaging enough? Am I not like, should I want to be more engaged with everyone? But actually I
No,
really
I
needed
think
that
you're
time.
right, and I it certainly parodies with me a lot. I think there's a difference though between like I would say that you have logical optimism in
Yeah,
that you understand the varying aspects of a challenge or a task or a project or whatever it might be, and then you can harness that self belief
yeah,
to pursue through it. Where, with the greatest respect to some of the recruits, some of it most definitely was naive optimism, and
yeah,
it almost created an echo chamber of, "Hey, I feel good, don't you feel good? Yeah, we feel good. High five." And it was kind of just that, like, it
yeah,
was a little bit of that, and also
yeah,
it's more reassuring for certain people to verbalize that, and just try
yeah,
and bounce it off other
yeah,
people to reaffirm their own
yeah,
thing. But you and I had some really had some really close personal conversations as well whilst we were
yeah.
in it as well. And sometimes, well, some of the time that I was flying back, and I regret not having spoke to you about it at the time, really. But have you ever heard of the Serenity Prayer?
No.
So the Serenity Prayer is it's probably known to most people with regard to addiction now. And you're not an addict, but
Okay.
just play with me for a minute because you will know where it goes. It was from an American theologian, Reinhold or something like that. And basically, for people reciting the Serenity Prayer in their heads about forcing them to pause when they're feeling agitated or worried or anxious and collecting themselves. And the Serenity Prayer is helpful for people to remember like principles of recovery, most specifically
Yeah.
in addiction. But it basically says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, change the things that I can, and the wisdom to
Hmm.
know the difference. And
Yeah.
it just struck a chord with me when I was driving back because it was that aspect of control that we
Yeah.
spoke so much about. And we
Yeah.
had different analogies for it, and some we found more useful than others, some you found more useful. But I did want to go there and just try and revisit that now that you look at it on retrospect and you find yourself back in a place of more comfort and security and
Yeah.
where you understand your place in the world versus where we were. Where did that, because it is something you've been consciously sort of addressing
Hmm.
for quite some time, and it comes from various different places, I'm sure. So where did that aspect of control and or fear of control come from to start with, and where, how did you see it re-emerging when you were in there?
So a few years ago, my ex left me the day before our 7 year anniversary for another girl. And I, my entire life was thrown apart, thrown into turmoil, and everything changed literally overnight. And I struggled a lot with depression after that. And a few months later, I actually tried to nearly take my own life. So from that point onwards, I think that's the tipping point with control with me. I think, um, you know, nearly taking my own life and what I went through after that, there was such a period of shit, like this really happened. I can't believe I got to that point, and the realization of what that would have meant for my family,
Because we were
and all
speaking
of
as
that
well,
sort
without
of
seeming
thing.
harsh, we had that in our minds
Mm.
where we were both kind of like, I would never be the sort of person to do that, both because
Yeah,
of how selfish we
100%,
felt it was, and also just
100%.
because of how confident you were in the other aspects of your life, and how this just strange fucking viper of a situation came up and just bit you from nowhere, and how
Yeah,
quickly it kind of gives you that understanding of how quickly some people could just spiral to that place
yeah,
when the world gets torn away from around
yeah.
them.
I think I just, I because I'm a very happy, positive, bubbly person, I just couldn't have possibly imagined that I would have ever got to such a horrific place that just seemed like the best idea to me at the time. And I think that's where the control comes from. It's remembering exactly how I felt that night. And it's not that I felt like I didn't have another option. It's that I wanted to do it because I wanted it to all end. And I had such feelings of relief, such positive feelings, to be perfectly honest, when
Mm.
I I was about to do it because it was yeah, I guess control. I was taking back control and stopping the pain and making that choice. And those feelings, remembering those feelings, absolutely terrifies me. And so that was the point at which, you know, I was like, I really shut myself down emotionally completely. Like a lot of relationships, you know, friendships wise, kind of I kept quite surface deep from then on. I didn't date, I didn't even entertain the possibility of meeting another man in that way, you know, really basically became as independent and self-sufficient as possible, because if I do everything myself and if I have entire control over everything, no one else can hurt me, because the only person that can hurt me is myself. And so, you know, that's what I did. And, you know, the last few years, you know, it took me a couple of years to move on and get over it, but the last year, 18 months have been magic. They've been amazing. I live a very beautiful life. I've got really great things going on, and you know, it's been incredible. But I don't think because of that I realized actually how, to what extent, so controlling of my own life, you know, like I don't think I saw the negative impacts of that. So I think that was quite a shock for me then going in. I mean, it was quite a shock, and it became apparent to me that it was going to be hard quite quickly, because I just didn't realize how hard I would find it giving up that control and not knowing what's happening. Like it caused me quite a lot of distress, like right from the off.
And also, there's so many parable or so many connections to make between that as well, because similar to losing a partner, you invite a partner into your life, and the irony of taking on this challenge is you had consciously invited this thing into your life, which has then seized control over everything and taken it away from you. So there's almost like a sense of self-sabotage where I've put myself in this situation where I'm completely vulnerable, and I'm going, and it just reignites those feelings of, it rubs on those wounds, doesn't it, of I'm going to get hurt again, or how is it going to hurt me? And our irrational monkey mind doesn't know the difference of emotional versus physical versus whatever different kind of pain. It just feels like you've opened me up to this pain again, and we both remember what this pain was like. Now, your logical mind would know that they were completely different, but in our primitive sense, which is where it really tries to put you, isn't it? We can't grasp that in the moment. And those are those moments where I saw you go quiet and retreat away and just try and find that anchor that we were speaking about before, just anything you could hold on to.
That's what it was. And I think it was trying to reassure myself that there was some form of stability in there, because I think that's one of the things that you don't realize when you're watching the show. And I think, you know, I had this perception, I guess, in my head that as you go through this show, you'd almost have like periods, like different phases that you were going through. Like I thought it would be like, oh, you're having food, and then like, you know, you've got a set time for food, and then you're going to go on and you're going to do an activity, and you know you're going to be in a certain area for a certain amount of time, and you are going to be doing it, and then you're going to go and do lunch. And I kind of had it in my head that the hard thing would be how hard the challenges are. But what was really hard for me was from the moment we were taken off that bus, you didn't know what was happening, and you didn't know what the right thing to do was either. I mean, like, you know, when we were like going up the river in the boats initially, and then the boats stop, and we're all going, what's going on? Like, do we row now? Like, do you want us to row, or are we going in the water? Like, are we supposed to swim? And we're going, are they going to think we're stupid because we're not using our intuition and we're not working out what we're supposed to do? And you question yourself constantly. And it was just like, right from the off, shit, this is what it's like the entire time. And, you know, when we went into the dorms, they told us, air your feet out as much as you can. But we weren't initially, were we? Like, no one was taking their boots off because we were so like scared of, we don't know what's about to happen next. We don't know where we're going to have to be. We don't know where we're going to, like, when we're going to have to be there. But then quite quickly there was that, you know, the DSs showed us if you do stuff wrong, you're going to be down for 20 burpees, then 20 push-ups, then, you know, we get punished, or holding the bags above our heads. You know, there were consequences to our actions or inaction. And I think that was just, that realization, whilst trying to come to terms with it, everything else is still going on around you and you're still having to keep up. And it was like, I think I can be quite slow to process things anyway. Like, I realize this a lot with my boyfriend. Like, there might be things that I'll think of, and then I might not tell him for a few days later. He'll be like, where did that come from? And I'll be like, soz, just with, processing. Because I think I can be quite slow to do that. So I think, a lot of those times I was taking myself
I
off.
don't think you're slow. I think you like to feel reassured that you believe what you're about to say. You're not the type of person
Yeah,
to
yeah,
just
yeah.
throw
The way
away,
you put it.
similar
No,
to like when we're having some conversations in there. Some people just are very loose with their words. They throw around aimless remarks. You are very
yeah,
intentional about what you say, and you're
100%,
often reassured in your intelligence in it, because if you didn't understand it, you'll have looked up on it and you'll have
100%.
considered your approach, and that's really serves you well in your professional
Yeah,
capacity. But yeah, I can see
absolutely.
where certainly in a close relationship or another relationship like that, people might be like, tell me what you think. You're like, I know what I think. I'm just going to
Yeah,
rationalize it for a minute and I'll take
yeah,
a bit more time. Whereas
yeah,
some people are happy to just go, oh, I've got about 5% understanding. Let's fucking go. And you're like,
yeah,
well, what the fuck does that mean? Why is there so much grey? Let's
yeah,
just wait and
yeah,
understand a bit more of the grey.
yeah. It's talking with purpose. And I guess that's, kind of coming back to the DSs and some of the stuff that we were doing as well. I think that is what I found hard too, because, so many of the things that they did or that they said to us or that they made us do, in retrospect, I would always understand why. There was always a purpose.
Yeah.
Talking about me thinking about what I say and only talking with purpose. My God, they are so much further than that. Every action, every word, every expression is so deliberate. They are
Yeah.
so, when you say that someone's like so cool and steady and calm in their confidence and assertiveness, that's what they are. They know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. But I think because there was so much that we didn't understand or we didn't know, it was like you had to trust them. And actually, like, Billy really reassured me at one point and kind of made me feel a lot better, kind of made me understand a lot of the purpose of that lack of control. It's about the trust, right?
Yeah.
There was a point where Billy was taking me to my mirror room to do that interview. And like, we started walking, I was just like holding back so much because like, that's the ultimate act of giving up control, isn't it? I can't see anything. I don't know where I'm going. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and not know what's going to happen. Like, this is going
Yeah.
to be so hard. And, he said to me, trust me to guide you. And I was like, okay, I've got to trust him. He's not going to let me fall over. He's not going to let me trip up anything. I say this, he didn't warn me there was a step on the way back. And I actually almost thought I was going to get an apology from him because I kind of heard him go down the step and then suddenly I'm going down the step and I stumbled a little bit. And he went, oh yeah, there was a step. And I was like, oh. But, it is that thing of, I guess I wish I'd been able to rationalize it faster to know that actually everything that they're doing and that lack of control has purpose. It's about trust. It's to know that actually, as your commanders, as your DSs, they know what they're doing and they're guiding you to be better. And I think that was where I wish that I'd been able to. I think I did start to give up control, but I think what that gave way to was fear, and I struggled to overcome that fear, I think. And again, that does come back to control because it's fear of the unknown.
Well, when you speak about that, trust is a very interpretive word, isn't it? And when we have it in our day-to-day life, it's actually very difficult to use it for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah,
Sometimes because some genuine people are genuinely untrustworthy, but also
yeah,
sometimes you don't trust their competency as well. Not you, but you know what I mean?
yeah,
We don't trust their
yeah,
competency because some people are just shit. They just don't
yeah,
really have a fucking idea of what they're doing. They don't really pay attention. And in the day-to-day life, that's very difficult. Like you say, if you're even just one of your best friends said, oh, close your eyes and I'll lead you where to go, you'd be like, yeah, but you're a bit fucking empty head sometimes. You're not really, you're lovely, but you're not really fucking paying
yeah,
attention. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Whereas, like you
Sounds like
say,
you're describing me.
yeah, exactly. In their world, it is very much that. And it is similar to what a lot of time we do in the emergency services. You've got no idea of what's going on outside. You've got no idea if the person at the bottom of the ladder is or isn't holding it. The person lowering you down on the line, they've tied off all the knots. They've tied off the anchor points. You've just got to fucking lean back and get into it and trust that they're going to do that. But like I say, throwing so many of us from the public into an environment like that, it really is hard for people to fully sit back into it and trust that the chair's
Yeah,
not going to collapse underneath them
100%.
because we don't operate in them circles, and these are consummate
Yeah,
professionals. Did you have a favorite DS at all?
yeah. I think I did actually. I think it was Chris. I really liked him because I think that he he made some really good points to me. He held the mirror up to me quite a lot, a few times. I mean, on that last day when I was kind of going up to the waterfall, he gave me 3 minutes to pull it together, or he was taking my armband.
Yeah.
At which point I was like, "You've got to fucking get it together." I mean, sorry, swearing. I
No.
was like, "You really need to get it together," because I was so desperate to do that abseil down a waterfall, and also didn't want everything I'd just through to be in vain. So I'm like, I'm getting it together. He was like watching me, and I'm like fumbling around. I could barely walk still at this point. I'm like, right, let's get this harness on. I'm trying to get the legs up and trying to do it all and everything. I think he saw like how determined I was and like came over and helped me. But he gave me a bit of a pep talk and was like, you're a professional, you're really successful in your life. You used to swim competitively, you're used to this. Like, come on, what are you doing? Like, drill into that. And it just held up the mirror a bit to me to just have a bit more faith in myself, because that's where I struggle so much. You spoke about trust then and about trusting others. Actually, my problem is with trusting myself. So many of those times when we're doing those tasks and they're like, crack on with it, I'm like thinking to myself, but they don't know what I'm like. They don't know that I'm going to be good enough. Like, they might have this faith that I can do it, but actually they don't know that I'm not good enough. That's what goes through my head. And it was just, actually, he gave me that pep talk. And it was in that harsh scathing way of like, come on, what are you doing? You're all these things, so why are you struggling? But also it was quite supportive in that it was a this person is saying to me, you are successful, you are good, you are strong enough, you've been through something like this before. Channel that, bring it together and crack on with it. And it was so what I needed at that time. And he said to me then, he was like, I'm going to say this to you once more, and this is your last chance. He went, do you want to be here? And I literally, I'm still crying at this point, like with tears running down my face. And I'm like, yes, Staff. And I'm just like, I can do it. And I think I saw this flicker of a smile across his face, because I'm there, like, I must have looked such a state. I'd been so ill. I was like crying, just going, I can do it. And then he was actually also the one later that was in the interview room with Foxy. And he was pulling me up on some of those things. Foxy was also really great. I was most terrified of him and Billy. I found them like more terrifying. I mean, the names they called me, like, I got called a buffoon multiple times.
Foxy's got such a quick wit. I fucking love Foxy.
He's so funny. He's so funny. There was a point when we did the height challenge and I was climbing up the ladder, and climbing up the ladder was fine. Like, I was so scared, but I as you said, I am hyper rational. I know I'm clipped in. I know I've got something to hold on to, so I'm fine. I'm climbing up this ladder quite quickly, and I popped my head through the top, and he turns around and goes, where the fuck did you come from? Jesus Christ, you're like a rat up a drain pipe. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry. But when I got to the bottom of the waterfall, Foxy just looked at me and was like, why do you always look so scared? And I was like, sorry, Staff. and he was like, why were you so upset by that? And I was like, I just didn't want to let myself down. I felt like I let myself down on the heights challenge yesterday. He was like, what are you talking about? Like, you were scared of heights. You got up there, you still did it. Of course you didn't let yourself down. And then he was like, and that was one of the best episodes we've seen. So, like, and he was so supportive. So I love them all. They're all really great. The thing is, everything that they said did have a purpose. And as it went along, you really did start to see that. You could see that they're not just being assholes for the sake of it. Like, everything did have a purpose, which was also so frustrating because like one of the parade squares we did where they checked our water bottles were filled up, I was so frustrated because that was the one where we'd actually been given 5 minutes to get outside. So we had the time to make sure that everything was perfect, and we had been getting better and better each time, and we really thought we'd done it this time. And we got out there. I think we ended up standing there for a couple of minutes, to be honest, waiting for them because we'd done so well. And then there was two things actually that ended up being frustrating. I don't know if you remember that someone had left their socks or their boxers out.
Yeah, they did. I fucking mentioned it about 5 times about various things because the only thing we're supposed to have out there was a dry kit. If you'd fucked up and your dry kit got wet, you hang your dry. But people were hanging fucking all kinds of shit out there, like it was their own personal fucking hanging line. But anyway, yeah.
So that was super frustrating because it was like we'd got out there on time for once, which was very rare. So we're like, oh, maybe we're, avoiding a bee sting here. They'd afforded us the time to be able to do that. And then he checks the water bottles, and Foxy comes over to me, and we had to hold our water bottles out, and he just looks at it, and he looks at me, goes, pour it over your head.
Yeah.
And I just thought, messing with us. And then afterwards, they said, your water bottles weren't full. And I'm like, mine was full. And like, I was so frustrated. Then, like, they said, who thinks their water bottle was full? Grant put his hand up. I put my hand up kind of next to him. And Foxy came over and shouted, he went, you calling me a lie? You saying yours was full? He went, I did fill it up, stuff. And like, I was thinking the same, like, mine was full. I made sure my water bottle was full every time. And he went, that bottle was not full to the brim. Oh shit, they want them filled to the brim because a few drops more of water could make a difference if you're desperate. And it's like, then you're like, and everything makes sense.
We told you the trick with that though, didn't we? Because I think we went over it afterwards. Because you can never actually fill it to the brim. What you're supposed to do is you fill it up, and then when you hold it out in front of you, you squeeze it ever so slightly so that you get the meniscus to come over the top.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart.
It's in a bunch of military books because it's a standard thing they'd make everybody do. I think it was in one of Matt Middleton's books as well. They always do that because when you fill it up, and then when you put the lid on, anything that is on the meniscus will get pushed out. So you're absolutely right. When you undo it, it won't appear full. There'll always be a couple of mil. So the fact they're all plastic, you just give them a slight squeeze. And
I should have done that because I swear to you, it was literally maybe 2 centimeters off being full. That is it. It was so close, and I was just like,
I think there was about 4 or 5 of us that didn't have to pour it over our heads. But you know what? I want to zoom out on something for a second because you've said it a few times there, and it's been such a poignant part of your journey because you said it about the waterfalls, and then you said it when you said you had those moments with Chris. That aspect of forgetting the person that you were, because like you spoke about your swimming, and I know you worked with the police for a long time, so you have confidence. You're a consummate professional, but you'd made one decision at one point in time that had stopped you trusting yourself. And I think that, when we zoom back, if we had a timeline in your life, those points of swimming and policing and all that sort of stuff, if memory serves, were before that moment where you'd invited a person into your world that then hurt you so traumatically that from there onwards, you'd have you didn't trust yourself to pick another person. So therefore the safe thing to do was because you're obviously shit at picking people. No, I made a mistake once, and then equally when you're doing these tasks, you forgot your own identity because your identity actually is, I'm a very disciplined, very capable person who made a mistake once. Do you know what I mean? Versus you then make your identity of, I don't have these capabilities and I was obviously just fluking it before. But as you were saying about that mirror and you'd started to make those realizations, I felt like that was the biggest win for you. I mean, what have you taken away from it as you've come out? And I'm sure you've discussed all this with your partner, and he's probably been a great mirror himself.
Yeah.
I'm sure the many things he was like, I know you do it all the time. Or I'm sure he was kind of like that. But has there been any moments where? What has been the big takeaway for you, do you think?
So I think for me, it's like I've really got to start changing this inner dialogue. So, one of the things I've spoken about with my partner. So I a lot of reasons why I wanted to go there was to try and change this inner narrative and have more confidence in myself. And I actually spoke to Victoria about it this afternoon. So when we were in there, we've obviously given wellbeing support. Victoria was one of those people. And I've had a few conversations with her since I've got out as well. And I think perhaps one of the things that I thought would be able to do for me was to be able to do something that is so hard and so extreme that if I'm able to do it, I will then change this in a narrative overnight, and I won't possibly believe that I can't do anything because I did that. And I think, that mindset was a mistake, thinking that was going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not something that will happen and change overnight. It's going to be a gradual process.
It's also not something somebody can give. They always say it's an inside job. It's an inside job. You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. But so before I went in, like this inner narrative that I've got, me and my boyfriend, like we call her Sheila. So when I'm being really negative about myself, Sheila's coming out, because it's like that is actually it's a known psychological technique that if you've kind of wanting to separate some of that pain and stuff from
100%. You
your
disassociate from it. Yeah.
identity, yeah, disassociate
Yeah.
it by calling it something else.
Yeah. It's like saying I love you,
So
but I dislike the behavior you're doing right now. If you say like I don't like you right now, well then you're making it about the person. Whereas I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
no, I know you're a loving and
exactly,
passionate, driven person, but the
exactly,
person you're choosing to be right now
exactly,
is Sheila, and that person is
exactly,
she doesn't. She's not you. You know.
exactly. Yeah. So I think for me, it's about, really realizing just how much that inner narrative was affecting me and how much it is affecting me, and kind of trying to take control of that and harness it a bit. Um, and I think what it's given me is that momentum to go like, right, now's the time to really change that. Because, you said that, a lot of my successes and stuff were before. I've had a lot more successes since as well, my new job and all of that sort of thing. I've done really well for myself. So this is me practicing saying these positive things. But
Yeah.
I think the problem that I've got now is that I don't necessarily enjoy those successes or really like take a moment to appreciate them and appreciate what I've done and what I've achieved. Because I even did it when I was in there, right? Being able to get myself together enough to be able to make sure that I went down that waterfall and then to get to the bottom and for Foxy to say to me, that's the best we've seen so far. All of that, the space that it took me to walk from Foxy to go and sit down with our Birkins, I'm already then entering that negative spiral of shit, we're now going to have to run with the bags back to the coach, and I'm not going to be able to do that. And my mind's already thinking negatively rather than going, oh my God, you were so ill, you overcame that, and you've just gone and did you know they looked up how high that waterfall was? 173 meters.
Whoa.
I abseiled down an 173-meter waterfall after being so ill and getting beasted up that hill. I'd done it really well. That's a win. I should have
Yeah.
celebrated that more. But that's what I want to try and make sure that I do now. And, I've spoken to Victoria about it, getting some techniques. I definitely want to get a life coach now because I think, one of the other amazing things about going in and doing this experience, there's so many different views and opinions that you can get from people. And I think by having so much control and shutting myself down so much, I've probably like lost a lot of that as well and not had the opportunity to get some of those different opinions from people. And also actually it's left me very alone with my own negative mindset and to not have those people around me to go, you're doing really bloody well. And I think, that's what's quite exciting now, to just open myself up a bit more, to like really go for some of these things and really appreciate how I'm doing and, try and not be too hard on myself really, because I think, coming out, I've already had so many of those feelings of disappointment that I kind of like gave up on myself, didn't push myself as far as I could have. But it was getting really hard mentally in there. Like it is not an easy environment to be in. And I think really when I had my mirror room, I think that was what really sealed the deal that I was done. That was so hard having that conversation with Foxy and Chris. I mean, they said like to me, why do you look so scared all the time? And I was like, I think I very much wear my heart on my sleeve. I think I'm very readable. I just show my emotion quite a lot through my face. And so Foxy went, what? So are you just terrified all the time? And I was like, yeah, I am a lot of the time. Like I was a lot of the time. And, we picked into my mindset and how I'm attacking myself a lot and don't appreciate the good things. And he was just like, that sounds absolutely exhausting. And I was like, yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really, really
We
is.
spoke
It
about the
drains
adrenal
me.
fatigue, didn't we? When we were,
Yeah,
that was a big thing
yeah.
for you. That because that adrenaline,
I think
I
that wrecked
kept
me.
seeing you
Yeah.
lurch out of your bed at almost
Oh my
everything.
God.
Someone would close
Oh my
the
God.
case at the end of their bed, or someone would come in from the
Yeah,
shower and you thought it was a DS shouting,
yeah,
and you were constantly
yeah,
bang hitting that adrenaline
yeah,
button. And that's
yeah,
exhausting.
yeah. But also, why is that? Why was I so scared of getting in trouble? Because at the end of the day, if you strip this back, when I have physical challenges that are really hard, or when I've got a thing at work that I'm really scared of, I will take it to the nth degree. I'll go, right, is this going to kill me? No. Right. Okay. Could I lose my job over this? No. Right. Okay. Could I lose my house over this? No. Okay. And you strip it right back until you get to the worst case scenario. And then you're like, okay, what would I do in that scenario? Can I get over that? Yes. Okay. So I'm fine. And that's the thing, that's, I think, where I would have liked to have been able to harness my mindset a bit more than I did. I think I was so overcome with emotion and fatigue. I didn't harness my mindset as much as I could have, because, you know, rationally speaking, those times when I was like laying on the bed just thinking like, what is going on here, this is mental, and then I jump out of my skin over those noises because I'm scared that we're about to have to start doing something and that we're going to get in trouble with the DSs. Okay, what is the worst that is going to happen? You know, when we went out on those parade squares and had done stuff wrong, they had us doing burpees, they had us doing push-ups, they had us holding the bag over our head, they had us pouring water over our head, they had us, you know, running around and dragging sandbags and all of that sort of stuff. Did any of that kill me? No. Like, you know, was it horrific? Did I get exhausted? Did I cry? Did I have to like slow right down to the point that I was like crawling? Yes, I got through it all and it was fine. And it's like, you know, I think it's probably very easy to sit here now and say all of that when you're absolutely exhausted and in that environment. It's one thing to think you've got a strong
again,
mindset,
when you
thing
gave those
to
examples
do
of
it.
your work, the places that we go to get those perspectives is often it's like an animal, with the greatest respect. We're all the same, so it's not about you. You know what I mean? Like a dog will retreat to a place of safety to fight, to make rationale. It will back into a corner.
Yeah.
It will go to its bed. We'll go home and we will think
Yeah.
about the day and the challenges. And you hadn't yet, and none of us had really developed a safe place. We naturally
No.
recoiled back to our beds, but even in your bed, you weren't in
Yeah.
a full place safe because you had so many people around you. You weren't
Yeah.
even really distanced from the DS because they
No.
could have
No.
shouted you at any second. There was
Yeah.
no place to retreat from, to be
Yeah.
able to see the forest through the trees, to be able to
Yeah.
zoom out
Yeah.
and get that perspective. And only now, like you
Yeah.
say, when you're in a place of safety, you can have that perspective.
Yeah.
So that's probably a big
Absolutely.
aspect there of trying to create that sort of fortress of security, and more often than not,
Absolutely.
that has to happen within your mind, because you
Yeah.
can't always get it
100%.
physically.
100%. No. And that's the thing. It was like, you know, the only seconds or time that we did kind of have a little bit of an opportunity to chill and feel a bit safer was, you know, at night time when they took our microphones and you kind of knew, okay, well, realistically, we're on a TV show here. It's not going to make great TV if they can't hear us. So,
Yeah.
okay, we're not going to be doing anything until the microphones have come back. But even then, you don't know when the microphones have come back. So you just don't know. But, you know, I mean, saying it's a TV show, like, I don't know about you, but you don't think about that or realize that when you're in there. It is the most real simulation of what it could possibly
No, it's
be
great.
like. It
It's really good.
really felt like you were just in it. It was
It's a
just
fully
insane. I
immersive
can't really
experience. Yeah.
describe.
It's
Fully,
not like, right, guys, the
completely.
cameras are off for today. Go and fuck about, do whatever you
Yeah,
want,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
No,
Like we have the
no.
perception of, and like we've
Yeah,
heard of with other
yeah,
certain productions. With
yeah,
that, it's like,
yeah,
there's no going home. There's no back to the hotel for
yeah.
tonight. There's no
No,
any of that.
no downtime. And you know what? I'm actually so grateful for that, because I think, as hard as it was mentally for me, I think, you know, perhaps sometimes you don't necessarily know what you need to be able to get better and to be able to improve and to be able to heal. And I think
Yeah.
perhaps actually the reality of that experience and how extreme it was, and how immersive it was, I think that ripped open my wounds in a way that I hadn't anticipated and hadn't expected, that I think has probably now helped me really identify where my weaknesses are. And that's where I really get to grow. You know, that's where I can be like, right, okay, you want to do well, you want to succeed, you want to be really happy and live this amazing life. You need to get your head sorted. Like, let's work this out. How do we move forward? And, you know, actually the reasons that you come out for and the stuff that you learn isn't necessarily what you went in for. You
No.
know, you think that actually, you know, it's about getting over some of these things, but it's getting over what those things have caused, and then understanding how to move forwards. And, you know, that's what I'm super, super grateful for. And I guess as well makes me think, you know, actually you lasted 3.5 days, and actually maybe you did come out right at the right time, because
Oh yeah.
that work that I need to do couldn't have been done in there. I'm not going to change any of that in there. And I think that mirror room, and then, you know, that final beasting was when I was like, yeah, you know the work that you need to do now. You know what needs to happen. And that's what I was there for. And actually, I did prove myself physically as well, because I got over one of the worst experiences I've ever had to make sure that I didn't miss out on one of the best experiences I've ever had. So, you know, so many of the things that I wanted to do it for and that I wanted to learn, I did. I achieved them. So, you know,
I think you
I
did
don't think you can
amazing.
ask for much more than that.
I was so immensely proud of you, and I know your partner and stuff. I mean, by the time this comes out, like we've said before, everyone will have seen the first few episodes, and they'll have seen it all. And I
Yeah,
know your family and your friends and your partner,
yeah,
and they are and you will be.
yeah,
I'm sure by the time this comes out, you will have an even greater level of self awareness, because I think that's been
100%,
the big game changer for you. Is
100%.
like you say, we can all fall in love with our own bullshit and overcompensate for areas with other metrics of success. And we've all been
Yeah,
guilty of that. But this has been something that's helped break you down in order to rebuild. Because most of us will only break ourselves down to a certain point, when
yeah.
really it's like that old mining
This
analogy.
room's
If
just
you'd
wide
kept
open.
digging another layer, you'd have got to the bit you needed to fix. But we dig a bit and then go, oh, I'm not going to go to the next layer because that's a
Too
bit.
hard. No, thank you.
No,
Yeah,
thank you. I'm
exactly.
okay. I've done a
But
bit.
in there, you can't get away from it, can you? Like, you, as much as you might want to, you can't get away from it. You're facing your demons, and yeah, that's what I'm so grateful for. But yeah, you know, the chats and everything that I had with you when I was in there, you know, you really kept me going. I think, you know, I was really floundering on even day one, and some of those chats with you just really, really massively helped me. So yeah,
Hey,
enormously
look,
grateful to have had you there.
you've got to be receptive when we try and help each other. All of us have. So it's only, and it's something we spoke about, it's only useful if the person's willing to participate. And
Totally,
your humility
totally.
and your openness, which again you've demonstrated so well today, I think that's going to be your secret superpower. And I'm really thankful that gave up some time to come and share this with me. Make sure you
Super
give your
cool.
partner a massive kiss and a cuddle from me. I'm head over heels in love with you,
100%,
and I'm so
100%.
grateful that we're able to share
Thank
that
you so
experience
much.
together.
Honestly, it is so good to talk about it because it's like that aftermath. Like, you need to talk about it, right? You need to be able to have
100%.
that conversation with people that get it. So no, this has been super cathartic. So thank you so much. I love it.
I know us and the
Awesome.
gang are gonna try and get together. Maybe
Yeah,
sometime before it all comes out, but definitely when it sort of hits
100%.
the wider world. But until I speak
Yeah.
to you again
I
soon.
don't think we're gonna stop doing challenges now. I love it.
No,
Love it.
we've been speaking in the group and stuff about maybe an eco challenge or maybe
Yeah.
some sort of craziness, and when
I
everybody's
think we
out and
need
when
to
it
just
comes.
go and do a tough mudder because now it will just seem absolutely piss easy to be like, we can do this, no problem. We've been through the jungles and the swamps in Vietnam. This is absolutely fine. Little
There's
tough mudder
definitely
down in
something there
Sussex.
for it. I mean, we could probably raise some
100%.
great money for a charity. Given
Really
given
cool.
the profile that the show will have when it comes out, it'd be great
Really
to
cool.
use that bit of attention to
Definitely.
help people if some way. So,
Yeah.
some love to
100%.
everybody. Thank you for giving up your
I
time.
will do. So good to speak to you.
I'll see you soon.
Speak to you soon.
Firefighters Podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continue, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.